We're good.
Okay.
Okay, and then Lori's checking up there. We may have to take a slight pause. The special meeting didn't come through, so we're wanting to make sure that the
Oh,
sound comes
very good.
through on the video.
And I think that middle console would be, yes, but let's wait and see what Lori says first.
There's nothing yet.
Okay, try it now, Pam. You're on the-
Oh, you can just tell me. I mean, I can push all the buttons.
So should I see pictures? Because, I mean, I see the Viking.
No, it said we're live.
Okay, it says live, but I still see the Viking.
And do you have sound?
Where's it? Is it pointed at us?
Well, it should be over
You're
there.
gonna have to go back out, go back in. It shows we're streaming.
It says live and it shows it counting. Started.
Now we're there?
Live and it shows-
Hey,
There it is.
Okay. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Let's start with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move that we approve the agenda.
Second. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Now we can move on to our public budget hearing.
And that'd be,
And we're gonna turn that over to Mrs. Krantz.
I'm going to
I'm gonna have
run
to close
this
it.
one down.
Seriously.
Good evening. Can't believe it's already been a year. These years are going way too fast. Tonight I'm going to present to you our 2023 amended budget. This will be really brief since we only have 2 weeks left of our fiscal year, and then our 2024 proposed budget.
Alicia, would you mind just explaining shortly why we would have to do an amended budget?
Sure,
So that
most
the
definitely.
group knows.
So amended budget really helps us bring into line, we might have had some unanticipated expenditures that are beyond an 8% variance in our budget. So our auditor likes us to clean it up, do our amended budget so it's more presentable out to everybody. So really that's all it's doing. It's capturing those unexpected expenditures and revenue. So any questions on that? Okay. So FY 2023 amended budget, we initially started our budget season budgeting at 212 units. We actually qualified for 217 units, 0.41. This increased our salary-based apportionment, this increased our overall state support. However, our salary-based apportionment decreased slightly by just over $42,000. Simply due to when we're budgeting, we project on current staffing allowances, current staffing footprint. And then some people leave and new people come in, and those educational placement differences is really what it comes down to. State discretionary funds increased, so we had a total overall state funding increase of $532,612. Our total revenue was $33,626,455. Our expenditures, salaries and benefits came in a little higher at $25,804,023. Purchase services just over $4 million. 1.3 million in supplies and materials. Capital outlay only $85,000. Our insurance costs came in at $148,220. Transfers to other funds. This is a projected number. I want to be open about that. Whenever another fund runs long and we don't have revenue to cover it, it has to be offset by the general fund. So if we don't have to transfer by the time June 30th comes here, I will not transfer. But what a majority of this is our Medicaid funding. So we are hoping to get all of our billing in and get it all brought back to the district, but we're still working on that. I wanted to be upfront and honest about that and show you what we might have to transfer. Contingency reserve, that's the 5% of our general fund that we put from last year. So $1.6 million. Total expenditures, $33,626,455. We have a balanced amended budget. Okay. Any questions on the amended budget?
If we can make a note that on the agenda, you see an action item for approving or denying the amended budget and new budget for next year. Those will have to be two separate motions, just as a clarification there.
Thank you.
And I just might want to add to the record for people here, we had a whole meeting on the budget, and that's why we have very little discussion here. We had quite a bit of discussion before, if that helps anybody here.
For the record, that's good, yes.
Okay, onward to the 2024 budget proposed. I'm projecting bringing in carryover of $2.2 million. Local revenue will total $1,965,200, and overall state revenue will be $32,352,513, for a total revenue of $36,517,713. This is a slight increase, and that's good for us because we're falling back from ADA funding from enrollment funding to ADA funding. So, all right, I won't read the individual line items. Just know that our total expenditures that we're anticipating is $36,517,713. Again, a complete balanced budget. The next slides will go through the details. Okay, salaries and benefits. All certified staff receive the $63.59 that the state governors and state office gave us per cell on the salary schedule. Administrators and support staff will receive a 4% increase on their respective salary schedules. The district is covering the health insurance plan increase, which is 6.9%, and the plan remains the same as we had last year. Dental plans will also remain the same, and the cost is covered by the district for employee, and that is a 6% increase on the premium. Percy, at their board meeting this last fall, increased the employer contributions for certified staff. So that's all of our administrators and teachers, anyone who holds an endorsement, from 11.94% to 12.69%. And they decreased by that difference, the support staff. So they decreased from 11.94 to 11.18. There is an anticipated increase as we move into 2025 next year. So.
And for just a note for those that don't know, Percy is the state retirement fund.
The cost of this increase for salaries and benefits to our general fund was just over $3.1 million, or a 12.1% increase. Okay, purchase services. Purchase services are any type of utility cost, any type of contracted servicing, any professional contracts that we currently hold, any software licensing such as Skyward, our ISCOR posting, so anything along that area where they're not a true employee, we're just asking for their professional guidance. So our cost decreased from FY 2023 to 2024 by $281,503, or 6.9%. The reason for this decrease, when this last year, we worked really hard on doing some building system repairs. Those are one-time repairs, so we don't anticipate that we'll need to do them again, and some of them were rather big. We upgraded some fencing and added new fencing in certain areas of the schools. We won't have to do that again, so therefore I lowered that amount by the $281,000. Supplies and materials, these are everything that we use in the classroom to help support our students' learning. It's paper for the copy machine, it's the parts and supplies that are used to replace and repair building equipment and systems, custodial supplies, paper towels, all those kind of items. Total increase from FY 2023 to FY 2024 was $201,567, or 14.4%. We did overrun custodial this last year by about $21,000, so I bumped that up a little bit. And heating and cooling isn't getting cheaper.
Things aren't getting cheaper.
Capital outlay and equipment. This is all of our classroom furnishings, such as students' desks, teachers' desks, chairs, tables, storage Technology equipment such as laptops, computers, projectors, HVAC units, ground maintenance equipment. This was an increased cost from last year to this year of $50,000. We're being proactive, trying to replace some ground maintenance equipment. So a total increase of 14.2% on that budget. Professional liability, this is both our building and our property and professional liability. Total increase from one year to the next of $37,056. It was a 25% increase. When the gentleman, we used Morton & Company, he came out and visited with Mr. D and I, and it really is just the nature of what's happening across the United States when it comes to property loss. So. Contingency reserve, our district policy states that we are to budget no less than 5% of our projected general fund revenue. So we budgeted that.
And if I could make a note on the insurance as well, we are a part of ICRIM, which is an association of counties. And so when you see an increase, as Alicia noted, there has been a general trend towards increasing, and it's kind of a secondary insurance that insurance companies have to give insurance on things. But I just want to note that this isn't because of any one particular thing that has happened within our district that has caused a 25% increase. We're part of a group. And so, for instance, Pocatello School District is, as a part of that same group, just had a fire. The fire happened before the rates were established. And so the impact of that fire is already on the books for the insurance company, which accounts for some of that increase as well.
Okay, makes sense, because I was curious what our district had,
Yeah, nothing.
something had
Yeah,
happened.
nothing beyond just our general, when we anticipate a possible legal situation, we have coverage from our insurance carriers to help us work through those. None of those were extremely high. They were simply consultation fees. But again, it's similar. We're helping pay for that Highland fire. When Middleton had their fire, we were part of this group, and all of those that were part of the group helped pay for that.
Do we periodically look at the insurance group that we're in and do some cost comparisons and things like that? Is that something that
We have employed Morton & Company to help us.
Okay.
They're the ones that do the search for us, and they did a search, and no one could compete with ICRIM.
Okay.
Is what and we asked that exact question of our insurance consultant. So.
That gives me more confidence about all the numbers. You guys are cost effective out there looking for.
Well, yeah,
competitive-
no one would even, because they have to go out to bid themselves, and no one could compete with the numbers they were offering in terms of rates for public entities.
Oh, good.
Okay. Other funds.
sorry, I don't mean to cut in. Our contingency is where currently?
In our general contingency right now,
Yeah,
1.6.
1.6, and if we establish how long, like, something goes sideways, that carries us for,
Just a little over a month.
I was gonna say, I thought it was like 20 days.
Quite a month.
I was gonna say like 20 days, maybe?
Yeah, our payroll's averaging about 2 million to 2.2, and that's without the special stipend months.
so that's our code. We got a less than a month cushion.
Is that policy we can change?
Yes.
Okay.
But Idaho code states you cannot budget more than 5% in the
Right.
general fund. But it's all about that carryover and creating a reserve.
Well, we're not even near 5% with this anyways, and this is that, I mean, that's not much, I mean, it's a month.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other funds, oh, sorry.
Let me just,
Sorry, they're light blue, I apologize. This slide just
This-
simply identifies,
there.
thank you very much, the other funds. So the general fund really is what we're majority talking about right now. Our other funds, remember, are allocations sent to us by the state, and they're, at the best, they're just projections of numbers right now. We'll get more firmer numbers on all of our federal funding when we, probably about September-ish, October-ish, even later, we're constantly getting reallocations, and I'll take the money if they don't give it to us. So it's just a really proposed area of other funds.
And when,
Go ahead.
sorry, I apologize.
Sure.
When other funds come in, they are earmarked specifically for whatever they're coming in as.
That's
They
correct.
don't go into the general fund and get real allocated.
That's right, do not. So these other funds, though, if we roll them along, that's where the general fund has to make them up, right? So they include special grants, our career technical education, state technology, safe and drug-free, the bond redemption, capital projects, plants and facilities, and then, of course, all of the federal funds along the side. I want to make a quick note right here to let the trustees know that once the modulars are in place and paid for and completely set down, we are going to be completely out of ESSER funds. So it'll be good. It'll be a good thing. So Carl's Perkins monies, which just sit right beside CTE monies, and then of course our child nutrition program is federal. Total amended budget of $19,121,249. Proposed for this next year, $13,682,087. So it's a total decrease of just over 5.4 million, or 28%, simply because of the loss of all those ESSER dollars.
And it's moved to ADA.
And the move to ADA. So. Okay, I wanted to share a little bit of information on our bond redemption fund. Many of you are already aware of House Bill 292, which sets aside money from the state to help us offset our bond levy or our supplemental levy or any other levy that we have. However, I attended a training at the end of May, and we have to put it to our bond first. So every dime that we receive from this payment will go towards our bond. However, right now, it's a projected amount. So we are taking an average of $1.6 million. They're saying 1.3 to 1.9. So we're going to be right in the middle, just a projection. But let me share with you how that works. We project out our principal and interest due over the 23-24 school year. So the total amount due will be $4,609,535.50. I first then have to subtract off our bond equalization payment, which the state also sends us. Last year, they sent us $784,000-ish. So I'm gonna project 780 because I don't see much difference from last year to this year. Then I also have to subtract off this House Bill 292 payment of 1.6 million. That means that when we go to certify our levy, we're gonna ask for $2.2 million approximately. And what that does for our patrons.
That's just the bond levy.
That's just the bond levy, yes. And what that does for our patrons is this. We received our projected preliminary values earlier in May. The value across Middleton is I had to count my millions. $3,963,267,712 projected. We won't have that solid number till February of 24, but it's a good number to start on.
Do you have any comparison to what that was a year ago?
Last year, it's only a 3% increase, actually. Yeah, like a 3.4% increase. So it's not that much more.
Okay, perfect.
Good question. So when I look at the levy rate that we could possibly be, that would come with this bond, this new bond money, our patrons, if we were to levy the full 4 million, like we did this last year, would be $100.93 per 100,000 in value. By dropping down to the 2.2, it's gonna fall to only $56.25, or a saving to every patron of $44.68 per 100,000 in value.
Sorry, so from 1 something to 56?
100, almost even.
Yep,
$100 and cents and some chunk.
93 cents down to 56.25.
Okay.
44.68 is the savings that they'll realize. Again, please, it's projected.
Yeah,
We're gonna do the best we can do, and when we get to that time, we'll share more.
And we have to certify these in September.
First Friday in September.
So just in layman's terms, the stuff that was, the legislation passed and approved in the budget was this money, and it's going specifically to pay off buildings for us, especially here, the
First, yeah.
bond. And then
Has to be
it,
used for
so it
bonds
lowers
first.
our patrons' yearly taxes that go towards that bond.
Property tax.
And so there's a savings there.
Correct.
Correct.
But it's not for the levy that has to do,
Supplemental
the
levy.
supplemental levy that has to do with paying for extra
Which goes
sports
to
and things
general,
like that.
yes, that,
Okay.
I would like think of that as that going to the general fund to help
Yes.
facilitate
I
some of
just want to
that.
make sure that that's very clear because
Right.
I think
This
that
is
there's
just
some
for the
confusion
high
thinking
school.
that money's going into the general fund and now we have,
Yeah, no.
you know, this $1.6 million
It's
more to play with.
earmarked
We
for
don't.
The untouchable, that's untouchable.
So our general fund sits here and our bond fund sits here and they're totally separate.
Thanks for clarification.
Yeah.
And we can, there's an
One is
item later on the
touchable, the other one's
agenda
not.
regarding the supplemental levy that we'll refer back to this as well.
And it might be good too to add, just to put on the record, that we have to keep money in there.
Yes. So in the bond levy per Idaho code, it says that we are to keep 12, we can keep 12 to 21 months of reserve payment in that fund. They strongly suggest 12 because what happens if everybody doesn't pay their taxes, at least you can make one more year of payments,
Mhm.
right? Not that it ever happens that everybody doesn't pay their taxes, but
So that's why there's just money sitting there.
that's right. That's why there's money just
Because
sitting
the
there.
state says we have to have the money.
That's
sitting there.
right. And if that money earns interest, that interest is put into that account. It's not brought over into general. It
Yeah.
stays in the bond.
So it's money that's sitting there that we can't touch, just so everyone knows. Which
Any
is a
other
bummer.
questions? I'm always available. My contact info is right here. Anyone is welcome to contact me. Be more than glad to talk about this budget. I love it.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate your work. I don't know if we had anyone sign in if they wanted to check.
Did we have it out?
I think so. All right. Well, with that being said, we need to have two separate motions, so I would entertain a motion to approve or deny the amended fiscal year 2023 fiscal year budget.
Make a motion that we approve the amended fiscal year 2023 budget.
I second that.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 I make a motion that we approve the proposed 2024 fiscal year budget.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. With that, we don't need to motion to close the budget.
No.
We're just gonna move on. Thank you. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Do we have any signed in visitors?
Oh, I don't know. Let's see.
Okay, perfect. Well, let's move on to discussion items. Let's move on to discussion item A. We're gonna have an update on Care Solace from Charlie.
Hi. First, I want to thank you guys again for investing in this program. I think it's going to bring a lot of value to our district, our staff, our community. We have intentionally done a slow rollout of it because we want it to go well and we want it to be a success. So in our initial rollout, we allowed our counselors to start making soft handoffs and referrals. And then at the end of the school year, we sent out an email to all of our staff, letting them know that it was available, the program is available for them and their families. Our next step will be to then roll out communications to all of our families and our students' parents so that they can start utilizing it on their own as well and not have to go through the school district. But to date, we do have 11 cases that are currently in works. We have 6 appointments that have been made, 5 appointments that are pending. There have been 437 total communications for those 11 cases. So 52 minutes was communicating, Care Solace communicating with our staff. 127 minutes was Carasolas communicating with clinical providers. And then 511 minutes has been communicating with the families. And so it is working. Like I said, it was slow, but that was intentional. And I think that we'll be ready to go, really hitting it hard at the beginning of next school year so that everybody knows that this is a service that you guys have supported and that we've purchased for.
So that's,
No, go ahead.
No.
I was just gonna say, and in reaching out to the parents, we'll be looking at doing that this summer if you're running into issues that you can use some help with during the summer while your students aren't in contact with school counselors or whatever, here's a way that you can start that process, and these people will help walk you through it. So we're going to be sending that out shortly to our parents so that they're aware of that during the summer months as well.
Do we have, what is the rollout plan as far as letting them know and making people aware of the connections that we've got for them?
Do you want to talk?
Yeah, so I put together a community or family letter that Mark is working on approving, and it goes out, it's in Spanish and English, those are our two primary languages. And so once we have that, then we can do a mass media, we can do a mass email, and then we can also list it on our social networking. And then on our website, when you pull up our website, there's a banner that runs across, and we have plans to, do like this is here now, but right now under all of our counselors pages and under parents, there is a link to Carasolas, and all of that information is provided in the communication that we'll be sending out to let them know. And then additionally, Carasolas has provided us with some email closing signatures. And our counselors have used them this summer. I saw a couple of them had put we are out for the summer, but this is a resource that is available to you. Please click here. And then the reports are really nice too, because it provides a whole nother level of information, and we can, as it gets being used more and more, I can even break down. But it'll show you what they were referred to, whether it was anxiety or suicide or depression. It shows ages, so we can see the demographics that we're meeting and helping.
And this is as a whole, not individual.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess my question would be, with the revamping of the sites and things that we're working on, is there a way for us to include, and I only do this because of my background, like some SEO positioning, when they're doing searches on Google and different things for, say, mental health Middleton or counseling Middleton or help Middleton, mental health Middleton, that we can drive people to that. It's a great resource. We've utilized this to lighten your guys' load, and it's needed. So how can we drive that if somebody's struggling and they need to Google something really quick? I'm in crisis. What happens?
Is that something that you're aware of that we?
I can work with Carasolas and find out.
And Vicki, she's
and
working on
Vicki,
that.
For
Okay.
sure.
Or maybe ask
Yeah.
Nick Davis too.
Yeah.
on the
Yeah, just
website.
any way that we can drive that to that program. We've invested in it. Our kids, we have some kids struggling. I just want to make sure that I would hate to hear that I didn't know there was something. I Googled it and I couldn't find any help.
Right.
So,
And I think another thing, bringing home the idea of the effect that it can have, remind me that, again, the number of calls, communications.
Yeah, so 437 total communications.
So that's 437 calls that either a parent or a school official would have been making on behalf of those students to get the types of services that they are, and that's
Awesome.
calls, emails, and you calculate 437 calls.
It's 11.5 hours.
That's a lot of
They
Just
contact.
calculate.
that-
Yeah.
And that's just because we rolled it out the last 2 weeks of school. Just to the counselors, so just the counselors knew as they saw students that needed that. So, I anticipate that we're gonna see that kind of a number, and I know that Charlene's willing to come back and share with the board as we get into
After
next
we roll it
year.
out,
yeah, no, I think it's important because it empowers families to take care of those things. Our role is to educate and take care of kids, and it puts that power and that accessibility in the kids' hands, because every single one of them's got a phone. and in the family's hands. And we don't have to deal, not that we don't want to deal with it, but it's not something that we
We're not
don't
equipped.
wake up in the
Well,
morning
it's
to
another
deal with.
resource
It's
that
just
we're
where it needs to
providing.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. We appreciate that. I'm
Yeah,
kind of
appreciate
excited
it.
to see where this continues to go so that we can remain more focused on the track of educating and the people that do that full time and have those resources. And that's a lot of people back behind us. I can't imagine saddling our counselors with that stuff. It's too much.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I think we made a good decision.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you.
The data sheet that you read off to us and everything, is that something that you said it's not individual, it's as a whole? Is there any way when school starts and it starts rolling out that we could get that?
As a board or out
As a
out to the
board.
public?
And
Yes,
out
that's,
to the public. to
As
be
a
honest
board,
with
it's something
you.
we could have a ticker on the website.
that's something we could share.
Help this village serve like McDonald's.
That's something we can
serve-
definitely
I mean,
share with the
look at.
board to look at.
2 million.
We'll talk with Cara Solis as far as the communication as a public
Yeah.
facing, document. They may have some thoughts or opinions on that as well.
Okay.
Sure.
That makes
My
sense.
biggest thing is that people just understand it's available.
Yeah.
And that's
Absolutely.
the thing.
And how well it will help
Because
them.
dealing with
What a
children in
resource it
general
is.
is tough, and then dealing with children that have some mental struggles, that's a really heavy burden, and sometimes you're just like, I don't know what my next step is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know after talking with the high school counselors, they were very positive about this. I was a little leery about what it could
Yeah,
produce, but when I talked to him right after they had gotten that presentation. And so I was, okay, I'll go with you,
Yeah.
but they thought it would be great. And already just that many in the last 2 weeks of school.
And I'll keep you guys in the loop every step of the way so that you can see the data and what the investment is helping.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to the chess club approval.
okay, and you saw the request, Mr. Sager at the high school is asking to start that club with the support. I mean, he was approached by students to start a chess club, and sounds like there's enough students that are interested to start that up, but it is something that requires board approval to start those clubs at the high school level. So any questions on?
I was surprised we didn't have one.
Right.
I don't know, I guess, anyway, I think it's a great idea.
I think it's just one more way for our students to get, share and be involved.
Mhm.
And, every activity that we're able to do, this is a relatively inexpensive way for a student to feel like, not that money has everything to do with it, but to feel like they're a part of a group that they can have thoughts and ideas. And so I think it'd be a positive thing for our school.
I don't see a potential downside at all.
No. As long as my son doesn't ask me to play with him.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
So we're just.
And that will be an action
That'll
item.
be an action item.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to discussion item C, the handbook approvals for Purple Sage and Mill Creek.
Okay, so we've actually had several other handbooks that are ready to go, but we were getting them a little bit later, didn't want to put all of them in at the same time. So we've put these two first. Many of the contents are similar, though the format's a little bit different, but not a lot of changes from last year to this year as you go through that. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to field those questions on those two handbooks.
So do we need to approve these two tonight?
Yeah. Well, you don't have to, but that was the plan, is you approve these if you feel comfortable with them in their present state. And then in July, we'll get the others. And that'll give you enough time to be able to review them because we now have them all and we can deliver them to you.
Is there any changes or are the changes notated on these?
There were not significant changes. It was primarily just to update
Like
dates, some of the different activities and things that are, There was some emphasis placed on attendance policies, which we've been pretty lax on because as we're coming out of COVID, we'll be trying to return to how we were handling attendance prior to COVID. And so there's been some emphasis placed on some of those in the handbooks.
I see where the students are required to be in attendance 90%.
Right, yeah, and that was not bolded, that was not,
Yeah.
just trying to draw parents' attention. And that's something that we'll be sharing in messages with parents as we get going into the year, especially recognizing that because of the change at the legislative level, the attendance will change how much funding the district receives, so.
So. Go ahead.
The school-wide behavioral supports,
Yes,
are those, I guess I just need to talk to the principals a little bit more.
and that goes along with the program, the positive behavioral supports and interventions.
BIS, yeah.
And so it's ways to try and proactively identify students that are behaving themselves well and encouraging that. It also takes a more positive view when working with students who aren't behaving properly. There are some aspects to the behavior matrix that we will be looking at for all of our elementary schools in terms of situations that involve sexual behaviors of any kind. Those are starting to move into our elementary grades, and our principals don't feel prepared to be able to meet that. And so we've met together. I will bring that as a whole once all three schools have met and we've kind of settled on what we would recommend. But we'll bring that as a whole to you as a board so you can.
Will that be utilized as an addendum? or-
Yeah, we'll add that in, but we want to make sure that we get it right just because there's so much sensitive nature of those kind of situations.
Makes sense.
While we're kind of on that topic, and for all the handbooks, all the different schools, is there, because we're dealing also with special needs students, do you have a way of differentiating the expectations for special needs students, or is there like a different?
Well, there are two different aspects that we would be looking at with our special needs students, and Cindy can probably speak to this even more detailed than I can, but first off, within policy, when it comes to serious behavior, suspensions, expulsions, those kind of behavior that would for a student that is not in special ed result in some kind of expulsion or suspension, there are different policies we have to follow for students that are in the special education program. The biggest piece of that being what we call manifest determination, which is where you as a group, meaning the parent, teachers, administrators, special ed teacher, get together to try and determine if that behavior is a manifestation of the disability that the student has. Because if it is a manifestation of that disability, then we treat that differently. There's still consequences, but it's a different set of
Like a
consequences.
separate behavior plan
I see.
could be
Because-
set up.
Right, because if it is determined that medically, and I'm making this up, medically a student cannot hold their hand back from hitting somebody.
Right.
Now that's ridiculous,
Hypothetical.
but
They yell out things.
right. So in that case, we would have a hard time punishing a student who can't control that movement.
Right.
But we would have the responsibility of creating an atmosphere around that student where they're not going to be placed in a situation where that behavior can put other students at risk or cause the problems within the system. The other aspect of the behavior is, especially when a student is on a special education plan that includes behavioral disabilities, they have specific, within their individual education plan, the IEP, they have specific requirements for those students regarding how behavior will be dealt with the administration. And so it won't be listed within a student handbook per
No.
se, but it will be within their own individual IEP and within district policy.
I got
And it
you.
can be a 504 plan as well.
Correct.
I see. Yeah, that
And
makes
it's
a lot
set
of
up by
sense.
a whole team that knows the kid.
That's why the handbook really
Yeah,
doesn't deal
it
with
does.
any of that
That's
stuff.
correct, because it's got its own set of expectations.
Gotcha.
Any other questions on the handbooks?
That looks good.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's move on to discussion item D. Discussion of request for proposals for elementary security.
Correct. So one of the things that we were looking for this meeting was a draft copy of a request for proposal, an RFP. When we do that, we took the criteria from you as a board, as well as criteria from our emergency operations team, as well as criteria from our administrators, looking for what's important. And a lot of those kind of lined up across those three groups. I put a draft request for proposal together, sent that to our attorneys last week, and our attorneys got back to us and indicated that they would recommend that we create a different type of RFP. And it's actually, sometimes it's confused with an RFQ, which is a request for qualifications, meaning that all you're doing is really looking for the person who has the right characteristics, or has a good track record. You put kind of a set of criteria together. And then once you've chosen that person based on those qualifications, then you work out a contract with that company. However, what they would recommend is based on an Idaho code, which is 67-2806A. I'll say that again, 67-2806A, which is a request for proposal where price is not the sole determining factor. And the reason that they recommend this is that if we went with a traditional request for proposal, we would, as a board, you as a board would be locked into choosing the person with the lowest bid, regardless of whether they met the qualifications. There would be things that they have to check off, and if they don't check those off, then they don't qualify. But if they check all those boxes, we would have to go with that lowest bid. Whereas with something of such extreme importance, our attorneys recommended that we look for a way to be able to make a determination without price being the only thing that we would look at. So what they would recommend is that they work with us as a district to create the new request for proposal that then creates almost a rubric. It's essentially a chart of, where you have all of those characteristics listed across, and you weight those characteristics, meaning this one is, has this much importance, this one has this much importance, and you weight those across and have a scoring rubric. And then you can take all of these other pieces into consideration along with the total cost. And so cost is not that sole determining factor. That then allows the board a little bit more flexibility. What you would have to do, once you've created that rubric and that matrix to judge the different companies that would present a proposal, once you've done that, you have a committee that essentially determines the score based on the materials that the company submits. Once that's done, whoever has the highest score within that rubric would have to be selected by the board. So instead of it just being price, you can't take all of those and then say, what, even though it has the highest score on this rubric that takes all these other things into consideration, we don't want that, we want to go with this person.
You still have an
You
objective.
still have an objective that you have to meet, but that is the recommendation of our attorneys as we roll through this.
Have they had other school districts? Is that what they're recommending to others?
That would be what they would recommend, though there are a few school districts that have done this already. One is up north, I believe Lake Pend Oreille, but they did it years ago. And they've just been continuing the process since then. And our attorneys were not a part of that. The one in Twin Falls, they had already created a relationship with pretty much the sole provider in the area. And so the attorneys told them that that it was not required that they would go out for an RFP for that group. They looking at our situation would absolutely recommend moving forward with an RFP that includes these other criteria.
So what's the timeline?
Timeline then would be, we would take this next month to get that ready. The new proposal, we would have that matrix to put in front of you with proposed weights for all those criteria. And I can create that based on the conversations we've already had. It doesn't require new committee work at all. But our attorney said that they would sit down and walk me through that process, because I've never prepared, I prepared RFPs that are the traditional, but I've not prepared one like this. So they said that they would work with us on that. And so what we would do is we would present that in July with the idea, it would essentially shift our original timeline a month. July, we would present that new RFP. August, the board, we would have the committee meet and present a recommendation to the board in August board meeting. Any questions on that?
That makes sense, really.
Yeah, I think it's more thorough.
It is.
Yeah, and with something as important as the armed security at elementary schools, I think it's important as well.
Absolutely.
Just as a note on the agenda, there is an action item to approve or deny the RFP, but that's something that you can just choose not to take any action on. You don't have, there doesn't have to be a motion or anything. It's just that nobody makes a motion.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's talk about the supplemental levy.
Okay, Alicia, would you mind bringing up that second to last page of your presentation again for this discussion? So as we've been discussing the needs of the district and the financial needs that have been approaching, one of the things that we need to address as a board, as a district administration, is how to look at our the current supplemental levy we have and whether that needs to be renewed. That's a supplemental levy that has been in place since the early 2000s. It's 1.5, the current supplemental levy is 1.5, and that's not to be confused with this bond levy up here. I'm going to use this as a talking point here later, but our current supplemental levy is 1.5 million per year. Last meeting, we went through, we did a reminder of what that was used for. Teachers' age, it avoided a lot of the pay to play fees. We still have some of those, but it would be much higher. Our school resource officers, some curriculum, some of our teaching positions, a lot of that comes out of that 1.5 million that we receive from our taxpayers each year from that 1.5.
Which that goes into general fund.
Which it goes into general fund and can be used, but we do have a requirement to fulfill those things that we are saying to our patrons. And now legislation has passed that we have to report how we are using those funds specifically. That's not been the case in the past. I mean, we would do that, without some official report, but now there is an official report we have to fill out. But that supplemental levy will continue to collecting that through this next year. But then if it were not renewed, we would lose that supplemental levy for the following year. So the 24-25 school year. So as such, we need to start making a plan now of how we want to approach that 1.5 million supplemental levy. And we have fewer election dates. We have election dates in November, May, and August that we can use. All passage of a supplemental levy in any of those 3 months would allow us to utilize those funds for that 24-25 school year. However, the later you go, the harder it is to budget. If you remember the last time that they tried to, well, second to last time, we passed this 2 Marches ago as a community. That was my first March here as superintendent. The previous time trying to pass the supplemental levy, they did not pass it in March.
We passed it in August.
And they passed it in August, but because it had gone past the time when we had done our budget hearing like we did tonight, they had to budget as if that money was not there because it had not passed. And so there were a lot of things that were going to be announced as cut and fees increased and things like that. That made it important to enough people to pass it in August. And then we were able to adjust. They passed an amended budget and we're able to go forward. My recommendation would be to look at November 1st and May 2nd, not those dates, but first look at November and then second look at May for passage of a supplemental levy, a renewal of. And I don't believe that we are in a position where we would need to increase the amount. And I think it's something to pay attention to when you look at the amount that we would be looking to receive from that House Bill 292. If we could, it would be a really easy switch to say to our patrons, we're receiving roughly 1.6 million from the state. We do not need to go out for a supplemental levy. However, as we indicated, as we talked about it here just earlier tonight, that 1.6 million has to go to the bond first, and we cannot use it for any other thing. And so what we would be looking at is asking our patrons to pass that supplemental levy, and the overall cost, if you include bonds and levies that we currently have, would still be less than what they paid the previous year.
So
Maintain.
we're counting on 1.6 this year,
Roughly, yep.
next year,
Yep,
but we're asking for 1.5 over 2 years.
each year over 2 years.
Each year over 2 years. Okay, so we're
Yep.
still lower and rates would be different on it. So yeah, everybody would still be.
Paying less next year than they would this year. And what we can do is we can start putting that together so that it's outlined a little bit more clearly so that, but before we did that, I wanted just some direction from you as a board. And this would not be, actually voting on, this is not a vote today to put a supplemental levy on, but directing me to look at first what the timelines would be and the expectations to pass a supplemental levy renewal in November as opposed to May. If we did it in May, it would be mid-May, and that would still allow us to create a budget. It does put our business manager under quite a timeline crunch because essentially to do it well, she'd need to create 2 budgets.
Yes.
One budget with the 1.5 million included if it passed, and one budget if it didn't pass.
I'm very curious, if we went back to enrollment-based funding, would that wipe out the levy?
A huge potential of wiping out levy, yes. We're in calculation of loss of support units, we're gonna lose about 2.6 million.
Okay, so thank you, legislature.
Um,
Sorry, I was just,
Yep.
So I mean, my thoughts are, we should look at running it in November in the off chance that it doesn't move through because we'll have a second chance to hit it.
yeah,
And I mean, if all the messaging is clear, so people understand this money goes for the bond, that lowers their tax payment. We're not asking for any more than we ever have in the supplemental levy. So they're getting the same services for a lower tax
Correct.
on their property.
Correct.
And we need it to function the way we are. And that just gives us a little cushion. I think it makes a lot of sense to get moving on it and try and get it ready for November.
Oh, yeah, I agree totally on that. Because you had mentioned, Mark, about the new legislation that says that the money has to be for the stated purpose.
Yes.
Yep.
Does the
Yep.
stated purpose then have to be on the ballot?
Remind me, I don't believe it is I don't believe the wording for a supplemental levy has to be on the ballot. But what we advertise
I see.
has to match up with what we report.
I see. And so we would advertise that.
It's those similar, the same things. I mean, we might adjust a little bit if there's a different way for some of those funds to come in. Like, for instance, if they were to raise the safe and drug-free school funds that we receive as a district, that might mean that less of those funds, of the supplemental levy funds, go to school resource officers. So we would then change what that looked like. But yes, that would be.
Yeah, and while we're mentioning advertising, Valley View just got their big bond passed.
Correct.
And for some reason, everybody thought it was in the Valley View School District. I got called multiple times right before the election.
Farm in it?
Texted, no, I don't farm in anything. I kept telling them I'm not even close to your school district. But
There's
the
something you do.
unbelievable texting.
Yes.
And it's like, boy, we need to hire one of these groups to help us.
And Valley View has offered to assist us in terms of showing the different organizational structure they had for their bond. Because they actually did a bond and a levy as well. Because
Yeah,
they had building projects that needed to.
71%.
yeah, they
It
had,
passed 71%.
yeah. So whatever they're doing,
Well, and I think a big part of that, and I hate to go down that road too far, but a big part of that is that it became very clear to the community what the impacts were going to be on individual students and families if it didn't pass. Because those things were starting to become a reality. The busing of students into different
The difference,
schools instead of,
elementaries, they're packed.
they couldn't go to the one that was 2 blocks away from them because it was full. So they had to bus that student. A new student that just moved in had to be bused across the town to a different school.
Yeah, and that didn't even involve the open enrollment.
No, that didn't
No, that
even
was
talk about
before.
the open enrollment. That was
They have a
just
lot of
talking about those
yeah,
processes.
interesting. I didn't mean to get us
No.
off track.
No, you're okay.
So anyway, if there's no other instructions, I will start working on what that timeline could look like, present to you as a board in July, the timeline for a November supplemental levy election, and
Language,
we'll talk language, we'll talk what we would propose it be listed as being used for. And then we can start working on that.
Should we mention what our overall timing is on a school bond? Are we?
Well, I think that's actually the next
The
topic, so.
next, yeah, okay, there we go. We'll just wait.
But the big thing is I feel like it would be important for us to focus on that supplemental levy first before we start trying to talk that on,
Basically.
because that's
that's how we
keeping our-
operate.
keeping our doors open and lights on
Right.
as we move through.
There's a lot of confusion people have between the two.
And I feel like if we.
Separate it as possible, to understand a bond's for building, a levy is supplementals for running things.
Yeah. Exactly. Yep, a lot of confusion there.
Any other thoughts or
No,
questions?
I think that sounds great.
It's worth chasing November.
Okay,
All right, let's move on to discussion item F.
Yeah.
Planning for requests for proposals for future school facilities.
okay. So, one of the things as we've looked at our past bond efforts is been a concern, and it's not the only reason to look at it, but it started the conversation, a concern about the process we use to design and build. The typical process that most school districts, and when I did a informal survey, it was around 70-75% of school districts choose to fund and build schools this way. It is going out for the RFQ, which is a request for qualifications for both designer of a school and the builder of a school. Now, the builder becomes the contract manager, not that they do the work themselves. But they are, the designer shows essentially a portfolio of here's the work we do. And the district says, here are the things that we would like to see in a new school. And the designer says, this is what we've done to do that kind of thing. And then the board votes on a design. You put that request out and all kinds of designers bring their proposals, and then you as board say, this is how we'll handle those, or this is who will choose to be our designer. And then you create a contract with that designer after you've chosen them with those qualifications. Do the same thing with the construction manager. The construction manager is the one that's going to work hand in hand with that designer to implement that process. And as we've talked about in that request for qualifications process, the design build process, when there are changes, the construction manager is liable for those changes. So a lot of times when you build large projects, it starts out at one price, but because of change orders that come along the line, those changes add up and you end up paying a lot more. And that's just one aspect of the benefits. So when you do this design build process with an RFQ, the construction manager is part of it from the beginning, and they assume the liability of those changes that come through. And it works out in the school district's favor, which is why so many have chosen to go that direction. When Middleton School District built the high school, they conducted an RFQ for a designer and an RFQ for a builder. The designer that won was Design West, and the builder that won was Benetton. And we have been working with them ever since. I would recommend, and I've talked with both Design West and Benetton, and they will see the wisdom in doing so, of redoing our RFQ for designing and building. If we redo that one, it provides a good venue for getting community input. Because we as a school district, as a school board, as administrators, are now deciding who's going to design the new building and who's going to help us get that thing built. And for a lot of our community, especially, I mean, not even just our new people, but even those that have been around a long time, they don't know even how that process works. And Benetton and Design West, as good as they've been for our district, they're unknown to our community because all of that work where you get to know them was done back in 2007, 2008. Mm-hmm. So I would recommend that we open up that process to start creating an RFQ for a designer and builder, and be looking at school facilities for our district in general. Starting our first project will certainly need to be an elementary school, and we can talk about that as the time comes. But I think the first stop is getting our designer and our builder, because maybe we need to look at a different design. Maybe to get our community behind, we need to not take this building that's going to cost us $28 million. And maybe there's ways that we can adjust the design to get it. I mean, and maybe we get it down to 24, and that makes a difference to families and community. I just think it provides us an opportunity, right, to kind of hit reset on our building projects and get us moving in a direction that'll hopefully see a passage of elementary. And that does not preclude Design West and Benetton from submitting proposal. But when they do that, then all of a sudden, all of that is now open and ready, so that if the board were to choose that company or any other, they would have all the information of why.
And to some extent, I feel this is a fair synopsis of what we've learned in going through the building committee meetings, to all the meetings and hearing all the feedback from the community. And there was some of those meetings that had,
25, 30?
I think maybe 50 or 60 people at one there at the high school.
Oh, the high
library.
school one did have quite a few.
Yeah, and so there was good feedback, but this seems like it's really in line with what we've heard from the
Well,
communities.
we need more options, right? We can't keep trying to hammer the same thing that we don't. I mean, I don't really have a lot of information on it. None of us were here
Yeah,
at the
Yeah.
time. So if we're looking at this and opening it back up, going, give us some options. What does it cost to do something out of cinder block? What about a tilt up? What about a metal building? What about, what are our options? Where can we go with this to maximize our investment?
Yeah.
How far out, if we spend a little extra, would that go? Or, I don't want to build a city of portables. That's just
Yeah.
not
No.
where I want to be.
Not
So,
safe.
and we have to take into account that it's going to be really hard to pass a bond anyways. And by the time we finish passing a bond and build a school, we need 2 more schools. And so we really have to make sure that we have this very transparent, so people can understand that, we have to ask for these things because we don't have the capacity. It's our responsibility, according to the Idaho State Constitution, to educate these kids. And as a parent with kids in the community, I want to make sure that experience is good. It already is. We've got great test scores. We got page reports regularly on how awesome we're doing, and we do. We have amazing admin. We have amazing teachers and staff that are just doing better than almost anybody else in the valley with what we've got. And I can only imagine that the better we empower them, we only go up from here. And so as long as we're empowering them with the best use of funds, because we got people that it's not free money. This comes from me and you and all of us working and our property taxes. I don't want the money squandered and wasted, but it's a necessity.
Yeah, the process will really illustrate how we're maximizing the value. I think that's what everybody wants to see, because we don't want a city of portables, but how do we, at the same time, we're maximizing the value of everything
Well,
we're doing.
it's a hard pill to swallow, right? I mean, nobody wants to pay more money, but somebody paid it for you and me, and so I mean, I don't mind asking for it as long as I'm not asking for something that somebody comes to me and goes, why did you buy a crystal chandelier to hang from the gym when it's going to get smashed, right? I mean, if we have full transparency, then we have the ability to answer the right questions, let people know, hey, we made this decision because, and we're trying to future grow here. We're trying to protect what we've got, which is an amazing culture in our community and amazing results with our education. And so if they're willing to put the investment in, then it's our responsibility to just make sure that investment is wisely spent. I think it's the way to go. I think we got to go back out and get some better information from what's out there, because we know through various sources what Forge cost to build. It's an $8 million school to build, to house all those kids over there. And if we're looking for something twice the size, why can't we get something for 16? Of course, costs for
That
building.
was 2018.
Right, but, there's some logic in there to kind of figure out what the best route for this is. And I don't think it's beating a dead horse, which is trying to move through this old school that we don't know about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other,
Talk over.
any other thoughts?
I'm just stuck on that open enrollment. I mean, we're gonna get more kids.
Yeah, that's
And I,
2 items from now.
yeah, I know. But I mean, I agree a lot with what Dave says. Jake says.
Yes, both of them,
JJ.
yeah.
Okay.
The two Js.
Thanks for being on that committee, it's good.
What I'll look at then is if we can get we've got some time, but if we can get a timeline put together of what that looks like, getting the RFQ ready, getting it out there, how much time to allow, how much time it takes to evaluate, so that you can have those people in place. If we could have them in place by January, February, that puts us in a pretty good position to get things.
How long do you normally leave an RFQ out?
At least 30 days.
Okay.
You don't want to go past 60, but 30 to 60 is what I've seen in the I've never seen it less than 30. In fact, I think there's some laws that may govern that.
Okay.
But I will get that kind of a schedule put together as well. And I'll reach out to Design West and Benetton and let them know, so that we can sort out if there's any kind of overhanging, costs that we'll have, for making that adjustment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, let's move on to policy review. The first reading for policy 2240 on class size.
So this is an adjustment to policy 2240, adjusting the class sizes for the overloads to coincide with our overload numbers that were agreed upon in the negotiated agreement with the teachers. And so what you see in the original, what you have there is with the new numbers, but it drops it from 26 down to 25 for the overload in the kindergarten and first grade, 28 to 27 in the second and third, from 32 to 31 in the fourth and fifth, and the grades 6 through 12. We changed that from being a 38 per class to 186 total for a teacher. So that would be 186 divided by the 6 periods of the day, which actually gets it down to closer to 31. And the way, just as a reminder, the way that this would, by changing this policy, then as a teacher approaches those numbers, those overload numbers, we would be looking at addressing the problem-solving process to create an additional aid for a teacher that might be in that situation, maybe for a grade level. If there's an appropriate place and finances available, and an additional teacher for the grade level. I mean, these are all different options, but it would be the teacher, the principal, and district level staff that would be myself, Mrs. Pennington, working together to create a plan that would work.
So there is an intervention plan.
Yes.
If we're hitting those.
If we're hitting those numbers, that stimulates the start of that process.
Gotcha.
And just as a clarification also, you'll note that those numbers are different than the recommended numbers from the state. And if we could, we want to keep things low. And if we could, we would have dropped those overload numbers even lower. But what we worried about with the overcrowding of our schools and the change to the open enrollment policy and the continued growth, that we would be getting to a point that we would not have a choice. And so lowering those overload too far would cause some.
How does this impact our numbers that decide how full our schools are?
It doesn't impact
Okay.
those at all. It doesn't change the
This is
capacity.
workload for teachers.
Yeah, that was my question.
But if we lowered it to a point where it was below what the physical capacity of the building was, that could cause a problem. And more so a problem in communication than anything else, as we communicate out about the project. So, so that's the primary change to policy 2240. And I would recommend at least a second reading, though it could be done in one, just to give any chance to make adjustments as we see.
So,
Any other questions on that one?
Thank you.
But if we get what we'd like is if we could pass this in July, if it's appropriate for you as a board, that would allow us to make sure that everything's in place for the negotiated agreement before the school year starts.
Do we need a motion on that?
yeah, move it to a second.
I would move that we move policy 2240 regarding class size to a second reading.
Second. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Let's move on to our new favorite policy, 3010.
And if we can just be talking 3010 and 3010P
Yep.
together, they
That works.
operate together. The 3010 is really getting the pieces in that say, that add the legislative piece in. 3010P is how we'll do it within the district. And I apologize for those, both you as a board and those that may have downloaded that policy online. It comes online with all of the corrections listed. I didn't realize that it was, and that's not a problem. It just, it's harder to read than what I thought I was giving.
Cindy's got it.
So I apologize to that. But the biggest thing, and if we can walk through a few pieces of this, is obviously the change to the legislation that allows situations, and this is on the second page. Oh, wait, no, it starts down at the bottom. So the decision regarding an application, because right now students can apply to, even though we're closed, they can still apply to be a student in our district, whether they live in our zones or not. And I should also note that the same ruling applies to changes in placement within the district, primarily within our elementary schools, because we have multiple elementary schools. A student that wants to leave Purple Sage and go to Mill Creek, we've been discouraging those kind of moves just because it creates, we already know that that's heavy, but it would not allow that kind of movement, but it would allow the movement from Heights or Mill Creek to Purple Sage, because Purple Sage is not over capacity at this time. But essentially what this policy allows is it allows a student to be included in the district at a school that is not over capacity if they are not, I'm just going to give you examples of why they would not be allowed. If the school is over capacity, so that's Mill Creek, Heights, and our academy are all over capacity at this time. So we would not be accepting new applications for those three schools.
From out of district.
From out of district schools, correct. New students that move in, we have to take regardless. Also looking at, and we've used these class size capacities that correspond to the overloads that we looked at, because we wouldn't be able to put it lower than something that we're allowing to come in.
Mhm.
So that would be K1 at the 25 students per teacher, and that's an average at a grade level.
At a school or across the board?
At a school. We have to, and we will have to publish this on a monthly basis, what that average is for the grade levels, so that people know. Grades 2 and 3, 27 students per teacher, grades 4 and 5, 31 students per teacher, and then 6 through 12, that 186 per teacher, all classes combined. Our special education classrooms, they had put a number, the ISBA looking at it had put in this number of 6. It needs to be higher than that. It's not, I mean, we would like there to only be 6, but that's more an ERR, an extended resource or severe program that would be looking at that number of students per teacher. So we'll get, I'm waiting for our new special ed director to have some time to look at that. So we may have to adjust that language as well. But we'll do the same for English language learners. The alternative classrooms should not have that little bracket by it. It would be 18 students per classroom that we're looking at there. And then the school capacities, you see those listed. So that's the first check mark we have to look at that would allow us to deny, is if any of those were over capacity. The next would be if a student is suspended or expelled from a previous district, and we're allowed to wait to make our decision until we have the files and records that allow us to verify that they have or have not been expelled. Next would be a history of repeated serious disciplinary infractions. Next, a student with issues of chronic absenteeism, which would be really important for us as we move back to ADA. You don't want to bring a student that doesn't attend into your school district and drag that average down. If it's determined that information on the open enrollment application has been misrepresented or incomplete, you could deny. Those are the primary reasons that a student can be denied. Now, all of those were the same except for the capacity, because on the capacity, previously we were allowed to make a determination as long as it was uniformly applied throughout the district. Which is why we said no to everyone, because then we were uniformly applying that, excuse me, So even my voice doesn't like this policy. So the concern I have, obviously, and this is something I just want to state publicly, is that this new legislation does not allow for us to plan for what we know is coming. It's like you have a tidal wave coming your way, and for 2 years, we've been preparing for the tidal wave. And we've been preparing by doing certain things to keeping our out-of-district students out, trying to lower that number, bringing in portables, all of these things. But then as the tidal wave gets closer, the effect of the legislature is to tear away some of those preparations that we've been able to make and speed up the tidal wave. Because what we see is as students come in and we're not allowed to turn them away, they will be taking those places of seats that we were kind of saving for the new building that's going to be coming into our district. And even though things are slowing, we're still seeing rooftops go up. And that's going to bring students into our school district. So it's going to create a problem for us in terms of how we accept those students. This first year, we're expected to bring those students in. For the coming year, they have to have their applications in by February 1st, and we can, for the coming year, deny based on, we can say it's that hard line that February 1st, and we can do that, but we'll have to publish that and make it very clear that that's how we'll be managing
So
it.
as of July 1, they can come in.
As of July 1, they can come in. And so what we're doing is preparing our forms and the information so that we can tell people, yes, you can go there, but you can't go here. And that's kind of how we'll go. We'll use essentially the same form that we've been using.
How much room is that, Purple Sage?
At Purple Sage, we are, it's 594 students is the capacity, and let me just,
86%.
we were somewhere in that range. Let me just get our last enrollment. I can tell you where we ended the year. Give me just 1 second.
Oh, sorry, I keep asking.
That's all right.
I know it changes.
Maybe the only saving grace for a while is that the lack of public knowledge. I don't know how long it's gonna last before people.
Oh, I don't know, there's been.
They're already
sent
talking
to
about it.
Everybody,
Yeah.
because they're
Kind
very
of a-
proud of their legislation.
Our amazing teachers are kind of a double-edged sword because people are gonna wanna come here. It's we've got-
So we ended the year at Purple Sage at 533
So they're very close there.
students. So we are, about 60 some odd.
Which is not hard to
Right.
get really quick.
No, it's not. So once we hit that, it is on the legislation and our policy would say it's on a first come, first serve basis.
But once they're in, they're in.
But once they're in for 2 years.
For 2 years.
So all of these students will have to reapply February 1st. And then
But if we have students move in,
we can deny for the students that move in for that 1 year.
So what a upset for
what a
the
lot of
kids too.
paperwork for you guys.
Oh, well,
I
and
know.
And it does increase the paperwork, it
That's insane.
increases the reporting. We have to update our class sizes monthly on our website so that
It's just like, it's really, in the end, it's a raw deal for kids that are, families, kids that are bringing them into our
Invested
district.
their money to
because
build a
we're-
house and a community to come
Well,
live.
but I mean, we're
We're
excited,
proud.
because, hey, this is opening up. I can get my kids over to Middleton because they got some great teachers, great schools.
Yeah,
And then after 2 years, Middleton's full up. Sorry, kid, you're gonna have to get the bricks, pal. You're going to another school.
Right. And I do think that's something that we'll have to be looking at. And according to this legislation, all these students that have been here, because they've been here for 2 years, it's just
They're
cemented that
grandfathered
they'll
in.
be grandfathered in. So what we're looking at is these new ones coming in now that could be supplanted by but we'll have to be making those decisions by February or March of next year, which then doesn't allow us to make adjustments after. So
So after 2 years, they don't have to reapply?
they don't, there'll be a format, and the policy allows for there to be a format of an intent to return, but not a formal enrollment decision.
I was gonna say like a normal
Well, then,
student.
so what, will we end up having to create a policy to decide who goes? Like, I mean, we gotta call the herd and we gotta figure out.
It's all based on timing of their application.
So first in, first out?
Yep.
Okay.
First
First
in,
for last.
last one out.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
Last in, last out. Last in, first out. There you
Yeah.
go. That's the phrase.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just as a note, I'll just run through these capacities. Mill Creek, 616 students. We ended the year at Mill Creek at 767. Middleton Heights, 396. We ended up at 542.
Oh my God.
Now remember, this doesn't mean they're piled high and deep. It's portables that have allowed that to happen. But
Still feels bad.
we base it on the building because of the primary, the community services,
Right.
Yes.
restrooms, lunchrooms,
Yes.
libraries, hallways,
All the lunchrooms and mats at
Infrastructure.
Mill Creek.
all of those kind of things that cause that problem. So we went through Purple Sage. The middle school is 1,200 students, and we're at 1,020. Did I say 12,000? I meant 1,200.
No, you said 12.
Oh, good.
Diana was shaking her head.
I know, right?
I'm teasing you.
The high school, 1,326 is where we're at right now, and 1,550 is the capacity. So,
But if you look at the overage from those middle schools, as they move through, it exceeds the ability for them, the elementary school's overage exceeds the middle school's capacity
correct.
and the high school within the next couple of years. So
Correct.
But we don't get to count that towards the capacity.
Correct.
Capacity, that's the bummer.
Correct.
somebody ain't mathing.
And-
Any questions?
Nope. But at least these new transfers cannot make us build modules. I mean, once
No.
we're at capacity.
Well, and honestly, if we're out of money, we won't. The reason we were able to add the modular
It's the
buildings
ESSER
was
funds.
because of ESSER funds.
Thank goodness for that.
Yeah, and so if we don't, it's not like we have $250,000 sitting
I
around.
think their transportation will have to. They're
Yeah, they are responsible for
to put themselves
transportation.
there.
The other
Or
part.
find a bus stop if there's room on the bus, right?
The other part that's obviously a piece that we would wish that they would fix is our inability to get tax funding for our local bonds and levies from these students and their families that come in.
Yes.
If they were able to pay, it would be probably a little bit different. We would still be trying to push back on that, but at least their taxes would be coming into support if we had to pass a bond or a levy.
So our open capacity divided by what, 1.3 kids per household is what we're making assumptions on, or is it more or less than that?
It's less, it's 0.569
Is it half a
Yeah.
kid per house?
per house.
Then, that's still, that's a rooftop, right?
Yep.
And that's.
Yep.
Lot.
And that's averages. So depending on the community, some of those subdivisions cater to demographic that might not have children with them at the time. Others will cater to demographics that have a lot of children. And so it averages out, but depending on what's going in,
Yeah.
you're gonna see those different numbers.
A lot more kids at the Corey Barton developments.
Yeah. Yeah, so, anyway, that is my report. I would recommend a move to a second reading simply so we can get those special education numbers, in
I agree.
place. And,
The third reading, you mean?
Third.
oh, yes, sorry, a third reading.
You're okay.
Thank
I
you.
just
We
wanna
get
make
it.
sure.
So to a third reading, and then we'll have those special education numbers. We will, on July 1st, start bringing those students in. Not our we'll hold off on special needs until we have the policy in place.
So are they getting all that offline I mean,
Yes,
they will access.
we,
that.
we actually have a waiting list right now of people who have already turned in applications that we said you have to wait until,
Oh,
for this next year, yeah. Yeah, they're waiting.
Go Vikings.
So can we combine these motions?
Yes.
Yes.
I would move that I would make a motion that we move policy 3110 open enrollment and policy 3110 PR1 open, 3010 PR1 open enrollment to a third reading.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Wonder if we can do a motion begrudgingly, does it change
I
anything?
motion begrudgingly.
Yeah.
Send that to the legislature. All right, let's move on to possible action items. I would have entertained a motion to approve or deny the chess club.
I make a motion to approve the chess club
I second
startup.
Awesome. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
that. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And entertain a motion to approve the handbooks.
I move that we approve the handbooks for Purple Sage and Mill Creek Elementary Schools.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. And with that being said, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session.
you-
We'll go by roll call. You have to read
You
that
gotta
whole
read the
thing.
whole thing.
We're not going to look at the other one because we're waiting.
Yeah, because we're waiting, there's no.
Yeah, sorry, I crossed it off already.
I would make a motion that as per section 74-2061B of Idaho Code, to consider the evaluation, dismissal, or disciplining, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent, that we move into executive session.
I'll second that.
We'll go by roll call.
Trustee Dempsey,
Yes.
trustee Wagner,
Yes,
trustee Powell,
Yes.
trustee Clark.
Yes.
thank
You
you.
kids come on up here and we'll sign your paper.
Oh, thank you.